Welcome to Build Your Best Business. I'm your host, Eric Holtzclaw. Build Your Best Business focuses on the entrepreneurial journey. What does it take to successfully start, manage, grow, and eventually exit a business? Today, we're talking with Nick Jordan. He is the CEO of Smashing Boxes. Nick, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, so first, tell us a little bit about what Smashing Boxes does. I could come up with so many different kinds of things that might mean.
That's right. Well, we're not a band and we're not a moving company.
I think of it as like maybe even like daycare or something, kids in their smashing boxes.
Yeah, we're a software design and development agency. We build web, mobile, connected devices for clients of all sizes, from starting with startups. That's where our business started, but we've grown into working with larger companies across many different industries. But the box applies to us because we try to think in a future forward way, which is how does technology help your business stay relevant and accelerate into the future? So we think that we don't want to be inside the box or too far out of the box. We just kind of want to smash it and have conceived notions of where our limits are. So it's a fun metaphor to play around with.
And you're based out of Durham, North Carolina?
And we're in Durham, North Carolina, yeah, and we have a small office in New Orleans.
Okay, all right. So talk to me about that, because, I'm based out of Atlanta, spent a lot of time in some other cities. I haven't spent a lot in Durham. So what's going on in that market?
Durham's a great city. I went to UNC Chapel Hill, which is 5 minutes away. It's part of the Triangle, Chapel Hill, Durham, Raleigh. A lot of universities, a lot of healthcare, a lot of research money, pharmaceuticals. There's a lot of corporate headquarters here in Research Triangle Park. So it's got a good mixture of business. I think they leaned heavily on, industries in the 90s like telecom that, eventually kind of went bust. And so it's been a bit of a rebuilding process. Durham itself was a tobacco town. One of my coaches, actually, his brother's my CPA. Their parents or his dad worked in our old office, which was a tobacco mill at the time. Now it's a cool, chic office space.
Right.
Durham itself is a good kind of Renaissance story of it was tobacco town. It was good kind of blue collar / white collar jobs in the 40s, 50s, 60s. It was thriving jazz community. And then once that left, nothing really backfilled it. That's weird. That's a new sensor that we have. So nothing kind of backfilled it, and it really was downtrodden until, I don't know, about 10 or 15 years ago. Some big community member who owns some of the TV stations started buying up some of the old buildings, fixing them up. They bought the Durham Bulls and then built a whole new stadium. Some money started to come in, some businesses. My first office in Durham was in the space called the American Underground, which is now going to be pretty cool. It was literally the basement of one of their nice office buildings. So it was like, hey, we have this old tobacco warehouse, and we have a basement. And they just finished the basement to make a cool space for startups, but also to monetize the basement. So it was a little bit of both, but it turned into a huge kind of economic development engine. So, startup community technology has really kind of grabbed hold here. And I feel like we're building something cool here in Durham.
So talk to me about, have you been in that area your entire life, or did you go there to go to school and stay? How did you end up?
I grew up in Indianapolis. I was there until I went off to college, went to UNC Chapel Hill, graduated in 2003, and I moved back to Durham in 2007. Okay. And so I've been here ever since. So at this point, it's a long time. I guess that's been the last 10, 11 years. We kind of didn't go back to Chapel Hill. That was our alma mater. Raleigh was the big city, but it didn't at the time have that kind of edge or culture. So we picked Durham, and now we're definitely Durhamites.
So when you graduated, did you immediately start something, or did you go to work for a company to begin with? What was your path to deciding to start your own thing?
Yeah, I'd always kind of been starting stuff. Your classic landscape irrigation system company, in the summers of college. I was trying to like sell fundraisers to soccer clubs because I played soccer and they were always running some fundraiser. Like I always had kind of like these weird business ideas. But no, I was in the business school at Carolina, went to work at Bloomberg, which sells software to the financial space. So I got kind of, if you're in business school, you ask the counselor, like, what do you do when you graduate? And they basically say, well, a consultant or investment banker, obviously. So like, you don't have a lot of choices because those are the companies that interview on campus. But I've somehow kind of like moved laterally into tech, still with my finance skills, I guess, or book knowledge of securities and derivatives. But yeah, then that kind of like parlayed off into more of the technology path. And I moved back in '07. So I've worked for real jobs maybe for 4 years. But by the last 2 years, so 2 years out of college, I was kind of already in the mindset of I had a job, but then I was like trying to start a website, selling things online at night. I was like coaching. I was doing just kind of like piecing a lot of small like business ideas together. And I realized I just need to kind of do one business idea. So I started a company when I first moved back here, selling software as a service to hospitals for kind of resource management. So it was called FTE Source, full-time equivalent. It's kind of a play on that. It really didn't work at all because they didn't want to share their resources with other facilities because of how competitive it was to find good talent.
Yeah.
Even though the model, they're still like temp staffing agencies. So like they're still, it's still understood that they're always overstaffed or understaffed, but they just didn't want to equalize it themselves.
Oh, wow.
So,
yeah, because you'd think that would be a good gap filler to have something that would allow people to use it. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, the user wasn't the customer either. Right. So like that's a startup 101 deal. Like the department managers, a lot of facility managers like really like this idea. We're like, oh, we would definitely use it. But then it's like, who purchases this? Who's going to sign up and like sign my licensing agreement or whatever? And that was someone totally different. That was in corporate. I was the CFO and they only make decisions once a year. And they're like, I don't know, we don't need it. So, but yeah, that kind of started the entrepreneurial journey. That was kind of the first time being like, I'm in the world with bills and no actual job, and this is my job. So I think, that started it. And then you meet other entrepreneurs, and it's kind of just grown from there. So I did another product startup with some co-founders, raised a small amount of money, ran out of the money pretty quickly, didn't hit milestones. Also, this is 2008, so we did not raise another round because the real estate crash or whatever. It was because we weren't hitting milestones and we were already undercapitalized. But having it be 2008 didn't help. So that was learning lesson number 2. Let's just get right into it. I liked being part of a team, but I didn't like raising money because you're basically always chasing the next funding round, not really focusing on the business.
Yeah.
So then
and that's such an important point. People don't realize that becomes your job, right? I mean, it's like it's at least another job, and it may be the only thing that you can focus on when you're in the middle of trying to get money into the company.
Yep. That's right. So, but from there, I, had met all these people. We were building software. We had a good group, and so we were going to build something else. We were going to bootstrap it. Like, all right, we're going to get customers, $40 a month and just get, 10,000 of them. And then we're going to be, just making monthly recurring income. It's the dream, but never really got inspired by a good idea. And so after about a year of that, we realized we were kind of just wasting time, but we were doing gigs on the side to, kind of fill in some gaps.
Yeah.
So then it was like, well, why don't we just do this as a business? And so I started, I made an LLC, started smashing boxes. And that was in 2010 with the focus of actually providing services and building stuff for other people with their ideas and like letting them chase their dream. But we were more of like the enablement partners, if you will. So we help bring ideas to life and kind of like about that mission as opposed to being the ones driving the new ideas. Because it was time for me for a break. Like I just, it's like wasn't ready to raise another round. I wasn't ready to kind of like go all in for zero money, and sweat equity. I was like, all right, just kind of consulting gigs, like putting that together as a business just feels a little more stable for now. And I'm sure I'll get back to making a product at some point in time, but that was like 7 years ago.
Right.
And so, here we are.
So it's such an interesting because there's a tension between companies. So some companies just go in and they build product, and then they have a real problem getting over to the services side, or they build services and then they're trying to figure out how to get to the product. I always see that with companies I'm working with, and one's often project-based and the other's recurring, and how do you balance the two of those? When I hear you talk about this, do you have a technology background, or do you just know how to talk to tech people?
Yeah, I'm more of the latter. So no, I don't have a technology background. I mean, I just was did the business. I double majored in business and economics, but even working for Bloomberg didn't really teach me anything about technology because they just had 3 floors of, back then it was called IT, and it's still IT, but now they're engineers or developers,
right?
Or product team. But yeah, explaining features and benefits to clients kind of was the thing. So I mean, that might have been kind of today's called like a product manager, but
right.
I was in sales, but to sell software, you need to know what the value of each feature is, or what the value of your product is, and so that kind of became the way that I learned to communicate with people, helping them see why this could help their business do better and be more successful. And then, kind of through the startup experience, is when I worked much more closely with designers, user experience people, engineers, and kind of learned, okay, this is front end, this is back end, this is our kind of infrastructure stack, and just learned through osmosis. But I used, I guess, my sales skills, which, I mean, I'm not a great salesperson, but you have to be able to communicate. So taking a lot of the technical stuff and wrapping it into something that I could communicate to somebody became kind of my value to my company.
Right.
And valuable to the end user because, even 7 years ago, it was still very early days in technology. I mean, it was kind of like that first big wave of Web 2.0 after the dot-com bubble. And then now it's okay, technology is a thing now. You can do a business with it. It's more cost effective. That's a more of a industry shift. It wasn't this big CapEx thing. It wasn't like every other business that you had to raise $30 million for. Like a small mom and pops could get going. There could be a small business. Small SMBs were a category in technology because you could get something going for not a lot of money.
Yeah,
so,
I was consulting with a company that needed to put an inventory management system in place. And I was building inventory management systems back in the 90s. And it was the licensing agreement was going to be $11,000 for the year. And they're like, oh, that's so much money. I'm like, no, that is not so much money. Those things could be millions of dollars. So we're going to go to a commercial break and talk a little bit about that transition, signing those first customers, maybe some lessons you learned in that path, but also how companies know to engage with your organization. So what are the kind of problems they're bringing you? How do you guys scope those out? Do you work, what do you do to work with them and make sure they're successful and you're successful at the end of the day? So the project's kind of good for both. So we'll be back and talk about that in just a second. We're talking with Nick Jordan. He's the CEO of Smashing Boxes. You're listening to Build Your Best Business. I'm your host, Eric Holtzclaw. We'll be right back.
So tell me how you came up with the name Laddering Works.
So it's tied into several things. It has several meanings. So Laddering is the name of the book that I had that came out in 2013, and I'm working on 2 more books in that series. So the first book was about how to find customers and how to create marketing messages. I'm working on one around building teams and then also being a good leader. So how do you run your business effectively, those kind of things.
Nice.
In that book, I teach you that you need to understand why. And we need to understand why very deeply. So you're asking that question multiple times to understand what your customer wants and how they're buying from you. So with laddering, we're helping you scale up. So we're laddering your company up to the next level by deeply understanding what's not working in the company. So what operational structures are missing? What are you not doing on the marketing side? And so we apply the techniques that I talk about in that book, and we ladder your company up. And the interesting thing about laddering is you think about moving up. Well, we actually have to go deep. We have to look up underneath the covers. We have to understand why the structure is not there before we can take you up to that next level. So it plays off a couple of ways, but it's based on that technique. And we're back. You're listening to Build Your Best Business. I'm your host, Eric Holtzclaw. Today we're speaking with Nick Jordan. He's the CEO of Smashing Boxes, coming to us virtually from Durham, North Carolina. So that Research Triangle Parkway area, which I started business back in the early 2000s, and that was a big area of focus for us at that time because you said there were like telecom companies and things up there. We spent some time courting some companies. I don't know how many we signed, but we spent some time up there. So, so as you started to get these gigs on the side, right? You were talking to me about that in the first segment, and you're like thought you were going to be a product or build product, and then you became the services company. The modeling for those two can be different. You've got headcount and people you've got to bring in and payroll you've got to make. So, how did you think through that? Were you just like, how did you get to where you are? Because you showed us a shot of your offices earlier. You've got a pretty big space there. So you guys have learned how to scale it.
Yeah. I mean, the short answer is it's a financial model, and it's very hard. Like building a product has a lot of upfront capital costs in terms of people's time and money. And if you're running a services business, almost at no time can you actually afford to take that much of your bandwidth off the playing field and put it to the side. So in all fairness, when we first started, we still kind of had dreams of like, oh yeah, we'll do something on Free Fridays and we'll just like whip up a prototype. But to build a product, to sell it, to scale it, to go, incremental and monthly recurring revenue, or to spin it off and raise money, I mean, it's a huge commitment. It's really a full-time commitment. Especially if you raise money, you'd have to just get rid of your other baby, which is your service business. So, after a few kind of like fake attempts at saying we could maybe do both, we just said we're going to do products, and it was we're going to do services, and we're going to make the conscious decision to revisit products, IP, different revenue streams just later.
Yeah.
And no uncertain terms. It just meant like I don't even know when later is. And now being into this business for 7.5 years, now is kind of the time, and we just have to evaluate how we're going to go about doing it. And do we bring in partners and have no one legally does joint ventures anymore, they're just complicated, but do we set up different partnerships or separate entities so that we have other outside people, so it's not all our money? But it's definitely time for us to think about how to be a business that's built to last. TM, Jim Collins. How do we be around for 50 years?
Right.
We don't just have one source of income and revenue stream, which is building software for companies.
But having one source of income, but having multiple clients. So that's an important part of a services business, is that you're spreading your risk among lots of different customers. Because like I was working with one this week that 70% of their business comes from one client. So if anything happens to that client, they're in trouble. Like they got to diversify that. So how do you craft deals with customers? Like, how do they even know to come to you? And then what kind of relationship do you put in place that makes it equitable for both of you?
That's right. So, it's funny because I feel like we just do everything the hard way. Like, it'd be great just to get one big customer that we could just grow with and scale into. And but no, we have every single project, every single client is a project. So they're all project quotes. They all stop. They all start, and they all stop. So we're just kind of stacking on different projects. They're all little puzzle pieces, and one's in the design phase, and one has a bunch of front-end engineering, and this one's kind of a full stack app, and this one's actually, we're just building an API for a client. Whoa, this is soup to nuts. We've got everything. So we're just kind of layering and stacking on lots of different projects at all times, just as many as we can handle. But yeah, I think that's a security thing though too, because we don't have one long engagement, which if it ends, we're just, in a bad spot. So, value wise, people need technology, and they don't always have the time, experience, or money to full-time hire at full-time heads. Because a full-time head is risky. If we have somebody get hit by a bus here, there's just another designer on your project,
right,
another engineer on your project, and it didn't cost you, the client, money. There's a lot of other value props of, we think entrepreneurially, we see your business as our business, or empathetic. But like the main market metrics are, it's expensive, you might swing and miss if you're just like, I'm going to hire 4 full-time people now and then hope my business works out so that I'm paying their salaries after 12 months.
Right.
You might as well do a 9-month project and stop it and see if you can really have funding. It's just a way to control your expenses a little bit more in the early goings on. Or for bigger companies that have tons of money, it just might be something that they don't want to have to build the expertise. Because to have an Android team, you first need an Android manager. You need someone who knows how to recruit for that skill set, train that skill set, mentor that skill set. So then you end up, a project that needs 1 person ends up being 3 people, when you could just go out, outsource it to us and partner with us.
That concept is your name smashing boxes. If you think about corporations, they are such a box, and they only know what works inside their existing box. So going to an outside firm specifically when they start to think about something new or changing something out gives you perspective. Like, you get to learn from other people's mistakes, the things that you guys have done with other companies that maybe didn't work as well as you expected or hoped, and that's not a bought lesson they have to go through. So do companies typically bring you in for augmentation? So is it their staff, they need more, or is it because they're doing something new and they don't know how to do it? Like, where's your entry point typically?
It's all of the above. Usually and ideally they're doing something new and we're going to get that started for them. We still might be augmenting a larger team, but we might be bringing a new practice or a new stack or just modernizing, the design, such that they can take the design elements, for example, and implement them across a lot of their products or their full product suite.
Yeah.
Or, implementing kind of a fairly new best practice of, building reusable components and forming a living style guide. So instead of use my design assets in pictures and in, layered PSDs, it's in HTML and in CSS. So it's easy just to go out and grab that. So that became a good practice a few years ago, and we implemented that with a few larger clients, and they still use that today. Like Cisco is an example of that, where we went back for another project, and they're like, "Oh, we're still using, John's style guide that he 3 years ago," and it's like, "Well, that's cool." So, and other companies will call us because they want to modernize like the stack that they're on, so they want to build an app using React or using Angular. And because when you're using something that's fun and modern, you're going to be able to recruit more engineers into your team that they want to work with good code. They want to work with modern frameworks because they know that that's where the industry is going. They want to grow their career. They don't want to be stuck in something that maybe is a little bit outdated. So companies just need a boost. Like, let's just kind of build something. Let's build it in a modern way. And then from there, we have a good starting point to grow, whether it's internally or to continue working with external partners. Other people just need to get off the ground and get from 0 to 1, another book, which is like, I have nothing. I don't even know where to start. Here's my business idea on this, piece of paper. This is what is valuable to the market. This is how I'll sell it. Please help. And then we'll kind of take that whole thing and, round it out and help them kind of figure out what amount to, build and what to spend now to get some proof points and some validation and, continue to invest or not, from there.
And so if you could go back and either tell yourself something 3 or 4 years ago, or you run into somebody else who says, "Hey, I'm thinking about starting a services business similar to yours," what are some of the cautionary tales or some of the things that you would provide as a piece of advice?
I would just say, call me and come sit on my couch and let's talk for hours. I'm just kidding. I think it's think really big, like think super big, because if you think kind of small, and I made this mistake where I'm like, all right, 10 people, once I'm 10 people, I mean, shit, first it was like 5 people, that's a good sized staff, 10 people, 12 people, like, okay, 20 is the mark, you can't cross 20, like 30, that's it. Everybody hits a plateau, 40 plateau, like, I'm sitting there, like, that was just too small thinking, and, I don't like, when you're thinking small, you end up focusing on a lot of small details, and you kind of miss the big picture. Then I'm worried about, like, is my HR manager, like, processing new recruit applicants fast enough? It's like, I've been wasting time, So if I was starting a service business, I'd really say, or what any business is, how has this become $1 billion thing? Even if you don't ever want it to be, but how could it be? And what are those steps you need to take? How do you make enough money to reinvest into yourself, or how do you go out and get outside money if that becomes a thing? How does services are valuable, but what are other services or other lines of business you might be able to do or spin off? How much does that cost? I think, I've been so focused on just hitting day-to-day growth kind of metrics. Like, did we grow by 30%? Did we, add this much headcount? Did we expand our client list? Did we operationalize more of our sales and business development this year? That I'm like, yay. But man, sometimes I feel like I just am missing the boat. Like I should be thinking, 10 years out, and how are we, we're $8 million, $7 million. How are we, $100 million? Because that's, and I think that's a book, or that's something where it's like, think about your goal and then times it, multiply it by 10, and then go back and figure out how you get there. So I think that's an
interesting point. Dana Barrett here in Atlanta talks about how you should always aim for the job above the one you actually want. So if you want to be the VP of some company, go for CEO, right? Because that way it gives you that stretch goal. So thinking really big, and then you'll get to something bigger than maybe you're thinking about today. And I hadn't considered the fact that if you think that big, then it makes you stop paying attention to those details. You're just thinking about more of the destination, not how you're going to get there necessarily, and you bring people in and trust them to do those pieces.
Yeah, well, it adds perspective too. Yeah. So it helps you kind of say, just having kids or whatever, some asshole cut me off today. Well, you know what? In the grand scheme of life, I'm very blessed. So you need to let that go, right?
Right.
So, I don't know why I just went to that. That didn't happen to me recently. But yeah, it's man, Billy's mad at Susie because, he didn't, have his deck ready for the client, but it was because he thought that meeting was a half hour later. Doesn't matter, just keep going, keep operating, and keep your eye on this bigger prize. That's kind of what I've learned. I think maybe over even the last year with, talking to people, talking to coaches and mentors is set your sights on where you want to go and focus on that, not, the day-to-day stuff, because then you'll get lost and you lose that, that visionary kind of thing that got you into the entrepreneurship in the first place.
Very nice. So future plans. So you're in Durham and you're in New Orleans. Are there other cities you're planning on? Is it just growing services where you are and servicing other cities? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, if I said, grow by 10% a year and just be happy with that, then I would just completely contradict what I said. But yeah, I think this year for us is about really kind of stabilizing and operationalizing our current core business, which is, which means how do we make a process out of lead generation, lead capture, client success, project teams, production teams, leadership tiers, promotion, recruitment. We're adding, we're building our executive team. We've got maybe 5 seats there, and I think we've filled 3. So we still are looking for a couple others. So I think once that's, if that's in place by the middle of the year, then we can really, look further out as a group. And whether it's with my group here or whether this group here is just focused on that 20% growth year after year after year and building the teams of the best people and the best projects. And I'm able to say, okay, now for Smashing Boxes or for Nick Jordan, here are the next things that are going to make us 10x bigger, 10x better. So what that means, I don't know. I think we can expand geographically. I think we can expand in terms of verticals. I think we can add IP into our portfolio, whether it's consulting ware, things that people just get that are part of project, but then we can kind of license, or if it's true spin-off projects. We bought our building, so now we're going to be landlords. That's kind of a totally different thing.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I think thinking about where that can all be and all these offices and all these product lines, all this diversification, in 5 to 7 years, I think is exciting. And then zooming back in to say, in 6 months, I want a VP of sales. I want his ass in a seat or her body in this building, executing whatever. And what are the steps I need before that? So we have to have systems in place. We need to document what we already do. So it is kind of zoom out, zoom in, zoom out, zoom in.
Yeah, it's constantly. It's I talk about it. It's thinking today what I need to do to get to where I want to be tomorrow. So it's this present future, right? So, well, thank you so much for joining us. It's been great talking with you. We wish you the best of luck. I'll have to make it up to Durham. I haven't been up in a while. So, yeah.
Good.
Yeah. So we've been talking today with Nick Jordan. He's the CEO of Smashing Boxes. You'll be able to find everything about him and his company in the show notes. Thanks for joining in. And until next time, what are you going to do to build your best business?